Hello. Hi, everybody. I just hit live, and after hitting live, I'm checking the settings just to make sure my sound is working. Oh boy. We can be funny sometimes. Oftentimes. It's fun to be funny. It's fun to laugh actually. Anyways, welcome today you guys to this moment on this vlog style conscious being conscious living the exploration where I share with you guys some of the ways in which I'm using the tools to navigate, to move, to thrive, to take a leap in my life. And this morning I was looking at something around the topic of presence. And presence, I think, is such interesting topic because there's a lot of talk around it, and it's a super um, relevant metaphysical as well conversation, and also something that we talk about things like be here, be now. One of the things I think we don't talk about enough is how intense presence can be sometimes, and especially if you're like on a journey to change. If you're like an enthusiast about really being greater than what you have been so far, presence is something that you've got to A, cultivate, and B, also familiarize yourself with. Like this morning, I was looking at quite a few things. I was actually looking at what are some energies, some topics, some areas, some things that I avoid in my life. And things like that, cultivating presence with stuff like that is not particularly, it's easy in a lot of ways, but from another point of view it's also not, in a way that it does require you to have a willingness to be with the intensities that come up. So anyway, I was looking at this fun topic of stuff that I'm avoiding in my life. I'll give you one example, and there were a bunch of things that popped, but one of the examples being my tooth, my wisdom tooth, and some like tooth care, let's just say that, dental care. uh I do brush my teeth twice a day, floss often and stuff, but there are some things that got to be taken care of. And so, are there places and things in your life that there's stuff that you got to be taken care of, but you put it off? That's the energy that I was looking at this morning, and it was intense. I didn't want to look at it. So, a part of presence is also really just including yourself in it in a way that I don't want to look at it is included in presence. A lot of times what I see, and sometimes I do too, is that we start avoiding stuff that first comes up when we're looking at something intense. So let's see, I'm looking at all of this stuff, it's intense, and the first thing that pops in my space is, oh, I don't want to be present with this. Guess what? That is the first thing I gotta be willing to be present with. That I don't want to be present with this. It's sort of meta and sort of nuance at the same time. But that's the thing that I believe. I want to use the word believe just very roughly, but it's more like I know that presence is what creates change. Because when you're changing something, the moment in which you change it is always a present moment, right? You might even change something massive for you in the past, and you access that moment through the present moment. So this morning I've been really curious about what does it take to really cultivate that presence with yourself, in this case like presence with myself. And it's really fascinating, the kind of things that I was looking at. So I thought I'll just hop on here. And guys, if you're listening to this particular thing for the first time, a lot of times I end up doing the conscious being conscious living vlog exploration in my mornings, because that's when I spend a lot of time with myself. That's my me time to like sort of be present, cultivate presence with what's going on, and really just make some choices from that space of presence rather than from reactive avoiding of everything that's intense. So, and this is sort of like a riff format. So I just turn on live and I just start talking with a broad idea of what I'm looking at and what I want to include you guys, and also share with you guys about, because I find that it might be relevant for more than just me, people. So, being present with everything without buying into anything, that's the energy that I was looking at. Being present with everything without buying into anything. Those of you guys who are familiar with Access Consciousness, which by the way is a platform of tools, a huge toolkit of tools that I personally use in creation of all aspects of my life. From my point of view, it's what saved my life, to be very honest, because I didn't fit into the world. Hello, my friend. Hi, Tunja. I have someone live here. And sometimes this is what happens in this show, that I say hello to people. So, anyway, I use these tools personally because they saved my life. And as they saved my life, I literally mean it. I didn't fit in all through growing up, and I was coping with something or the other. Like I had these great coping mechanisms set up, but I wasn't truly thriving. I didn't feel like I knew, let's just say I knew something different is available. And to me, access was that different. Actually, no, not access. I am that difference that's available, but access gives me the tools that sort of like are very out of box and are sort of like what I share with you guys here a lot of times too, that allow me to be more in presence with me. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but being you is intense. And that's not a wrong thing. That's not a right thing. That's not to say it's difficult. Hi, hello, Harish from India. So nice to have you here, my friend. So I'm not saying that it's difficult or it's hard. I'm just saying it's intense. So just saying that to point out, notice even when I say that, hey, living is intense, what do you make that mean? And does that actually mean that? Or is that a presumption that you have, like, oh, intense means hard or intense means difficult? So just pointing that out, that that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's intense, like you're an if you're an not if you're an infinite being. Like I'm talking, let's just talk about me. To you, I'd rather ask, what do you get? Are you an infinite being or are you a finite being? I often ask this question to myself to sort of like reorient, uh not even reorient, more like remind myself of what's actually true for me. And so, speaking of me, I invite you to speak to you, like look at what's true for you with this too. Um, I'm like, I'm an infinite being. I get that. And as an infinite being, I'm not just here. This my body's here. I'm in communion a lot of times with my body, sometimes not. Um, but as an infinite being, also, I'm infinite. I'm everywhere. Like, have you noticed? Even if you were to like close your eyes and just have your awareness on somebody, and you might notice that you actually become aware of their universe. How does that work? Because you're an infinite being. I look at this pretty frequently. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm an infinite being. I'm everywhere. I'm aware of so many different things. It's intense. Yeah, cool. Now, once you acknowledge that it's intense without making it that it's intense mean anything else, if you just acknowledge what is, you can ask another question. Okay, how can I be with this? How can I be with this in a way that's total ease? When I ask that question, what I sort of get is like really expanding out a lot more. Like even as I just start engaging with that energy, that okay, cool, I'm an infinite being. I'm aware. Just that acknowledgement in itself, sort of like without resistance, acknowledgement without resistance of what I'm aware of, sort of like it's like my being automatically starts to like instantaneously, rather not automatically, it's like I get that perspective of, oh, okay, I'm aware, cool, I can be more. How much more space, this is another conversation that I often have with myself, that how much more space do I need to be? How much more space would I like to be? How much more space can I expand into that would create greater ease for me? How much more space do I require to literally have a breathing space? And when I'm saying space, I'm not talking about the physical space. I'm talking more about your psychic space. How much more space can you be that would allow you to have ease with whatever you're aware of? So I was looking at that this morning, and I was looking at, oh, being present with everything without buying into anything. That's what I'd like to have. Okay, sorry. I'm sort of like going on a tangent. I wanted to like look at the reason I started talking about I use the tools of access consciousness is because um, if you're familiar with these tools or have heard these conversations recently, there's this thing that we call the Big Five, which is basically a perspective on how things work. This purpose of this call here is not to go into details of that. Um, if you are curious about what the big fives are, like message me. I did a telecall recently on clarifying the big fives and how to use them. And happy to also, like, this is not basically, this place is not a conversation for what that is, but I'm just bringing that here to just show that there's a tool that's available. And one of the elements of the big five is what we sort of talked about a few moments ago, which is, it's called presumptive reality, but essentially it's like, how many presumptions do we function from? Like, presuming that intensity is hard. A lot of times, this is a very common presumption people function from. And the thing is, when you're functioning as a presumption, you don't even question it. So you function as if that is what it is. That, oh my gosh, it's intense and it's hard. Like, you don't even have and it's hard. It's like, it's so hard. A lot of times people have that point of view that this is so hard. This is so difficult. Um, and when you truly break it down and are willing to cultivate presence with it and really ask a question, wait, okay, is it hard or is it intense? Ah, it's intense. Ooh. So, what does it require of me to be? What can I be with this? How much space can I be with this? First of all, right? How much space do I require? How much space can I occupy? My psychic space, right? How much space can I be with this that would allow me to have ease with it? Great question to like look at. And so, what I was looking at was the funny thing is that I was literally looking at this thing about this topic of what I'm avoiding in all aspects. And one of them, as I shared with you earlier, is wisdom tooth. I have wisdom tooth, like all four of them. And I know that my body's been saying like it'll be a lot more ease to like take care of some stuff with that. And I'm avoiding looking at it. And there are a lot of different things that I was looking at. Oh, I'm avoiding looking at this. I'm avoiding taking care of this. I'm avoiding like what's that word, like I'm putting things off in this particular way. And this is also one thing that I've been curious about for a while now, that where am I putting things off, and is that creating more ease in my world, or what is that creating in my world? And I looked at that, and I look at that energy, and it's intense, it's uncomfortable, it's not a sort of energy that um in these 10 seconds, these 10 seconds are a little bit different actually. But on a regular day, if I were to catch myself in a given 10 seconds, a lot of times I don't want to be present with that kind of intensity. And so when I talk about presence, having presence with even that, I think that is the beginning of presence, where you're not like fighting what's showing up for you in any given 10 seconds, even that if that is that I don't want to be present with this, you're not fighting with it to be present, which is funny, but that's a lot of times what people do. Oh my god, this is intense. Oh no, 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 avoid that, avoid that. I want to be present. Oh no, no, not that. Can I be present? Doesn't really work. Because to be present, you got to be present with everything, including with I don't want to be present. And so what I find is when I allow, and that's what in access, like we'd call it allowance. Allowance is basically a place where everything is included. Everything is included, nothing is judged. Allowance is the same as consciousness. You cannot truly have consciousness without allowance. And there is enormous consciousness in allowance. So allowance is always the loosely speaking the first step. You've got to have that allowance with what is, even if it is intense. And even if it is intense, so the part that I wanted to speak to here, let's see how this is going to come out. Um, when I was writing that being present with everything without buying into anything, I was looking at that whole big five energy. Big five energy, if I were to like just in a broad sense give you like a overview of it, it's like anything that gets heavy is sort of like a big five energy. So when I'm looking at being present with everything without buying into anything, what that actually entails is being present with everything that might be heavy. And a lot of times, things that are heavy, things that are dense, feel quote unquote very real. So, that is what I mean by when I say being present with everything without buying into anything. That truly being present requires you to, yes, be present with intensity, but from this space of awareness that this is not real, or this doesn't really, this doesn't have to be. This is not real. What's heavy is not real. What's light is what's true for me. What's heavy is a lie. And it's sometimes a massive stretch. Like, I'm in a 3-day body class these days. Um, and yesterday we were looking at this. Gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm in the middle of the sentence, forgot what I was talking about here. Why did the 3-day body class came? And there's something very particular, an example that popped. What was that? Okay, I'm just gonna keep going. Maybe it'll pop in a relevant timing again. Maybe it'll not. But we are looking at presence right now, right? So, really, what sometimes presence requires, not sometimes, what presence does always require is presence is not buying into this is what it is. If you're functioning from a presumptive reality, which is basically, oh, this is what it is, you're not truly present. Presence is where you're present with what is and you're not making it mean anything. So even if it is heavy, you're not, yeah, now I remember the example. Even if it is heavy, you're not making it something that is real. So the example is this: one of the tools in access consciousness is who does this belong to, which is basically an invitation for you to be aware that you're aware. That not everything that you think is your thought might be your thought. How would you know? By asking, is that mine? So that's this: who does this belong to? Not everything you feel may be yours. How do you know if it is yours or not? By asking, is this mine? So last year I started I had this whole my body became a very loud facilitator, and I had a lot of functions symptoms come up. One of them is what in the medical world is called a tachycardia. Tachycardia is basically your heart rate pacing so high even on rest, like literally as if you're running a marathon. I mean, actually, when you're running a marathon, your body's in a different physiology. But it's almost like if there was some really big threat, you're in that survival mode. Even when you're lying down, I mean, that may not necessarily always be what tachycardia is, but basically tachycardia is like super heart rate, the super fast heart rate. Like if the normal, what's considered quote unquote normal rhythm of heart is like maybe, let's say, around 80, 70 to 80, 70 to 90, 60 to 90, somewhere around that, beats per minute. My heart rate would be like 160 beats per minute. And even in the time when I'm resting, not doing anything, that should quote unquote trigger that. So, and it was very, very intense for me. And I didn't have a space of asking question with it for a really long time. I knew that I got to ask a question, but that energy was so like, sometimes when you're in the survival mode, that becomes such a prominent energy that you do not have space to really ask questions that might create something different. So that's all okay too. But basically, about who does this belong to, I was like really using tools. Some things would work, some things, would temporarily work, but it wasn't really getting resolved. Like, I didn't have tachycardia all the time, but unannounced it would come up and it would consume a lot of my energy. I'd be totally fatigued after a few episodes, quite a few minutes of it. A doctors wanted me to take like some anxiety pills and stuff, and I knew better. I was like, no, that's not going to work for me. So I was like asking questions, not truly getting to asking questions in a way that would open up something entirely for me, but still asking questions. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to do it right. You just got to ask any question that is light, just opens up some space of possibility. From that space, ask another question. It's like these 10-second increment of choices. Anyway, so I once got to ask Gary about this, and I was like, Gary, like, I have this thing, like my heart starts to palpitate like so fast. What is this? And he asked me, well, who does that belong to? Is it yours? And to me, in that moment was like, what? I was like, are you? I literally asked him, so you're asking me if my heart that's beating that fast, that can be read, it can be recorded, like, is that mine? And he said, yeah. So I looked at it because I know better. I'm like, oh, Gary's asking a question. There's something that he's seeing here. What is it? So I looked at it. I'm like, I asked basically. I'm like, okay, is it mine? And I got it's not, which is bizarre, right? And how do you know? How do you know? Like when I'm saying that I got that it's not mine, how did I get that? The tool light and heavy. What's light is what's true for you, what's heavy is the light. And it's also something that I find you've got to cultivate presence with. A lot of times we are so used to being in our mind all the time that it's when you first start out that what is light, what is heavy might not be super clear. That's okay. That's sort of like I'm actually looking at doing something where I want to educate people on these basic tools, on how to use them, because I educate myself on them all the time. Even though now I have a different perspective, sometimes I still need to look at it from a different place. But anyway, so I looked at it and it was light. So that's how I knew that when I looked at it, is it mine? I got that no. When I said no, it was light. It just opened up energetically a lot of space, even though physically I had a lot of um, experience, reason, and justification that it's not. It is mine because hello, it's my heart, my body. You can fucking measure it in an instrument. But when I looked at it energetically, I got that it's not mine. And that was the beginning of what I can now see. I always say that, you don't know how when you're in it, but you always know it in a retrospect. Like a lot of times you get stuck on, but how do I change this? How do I change this? Like, need to know how. I didn't know how. Uh, but I kept choosing in those 10-second increments of choice, with just going with whatever is light, even if it's not making sense, especially if it's not making sense. It's not light, so it's not true. I don't yet have information on what is true, but never mind. This is not. So Pock and Pod said, like, really intensely use these tools. Um, and in those moments you don't know how beforehand. Now how is something you can, when you look back, you can see how it worked. Like everything makes sense in a retrospect, but in those moments we don't really know how. So that's also on a side note to, like, for you to look at where you might be waiting for how to show up before you choose something. And what if you just made one choice after another of whatever is light for you and allowed it to show you how, not get stuck up on the need to know how. So anyway, to me that was the beginning of change. Like for months now I've not had tachycardia. I've been totally fine and free of it. And how did it change? I didn't know on the journey. There's information I'd probably a year from now know about this that I don't right now cognitively get. But I, that one willingness to look at, wait, this pounding of heart, my heart is not mine, started opening up a completely different possibility for me. Because from that space, I started asking different questions. Anytime that would pop up, I would tune into my heart and be like, is this mine? And it's intense, you guys. That's what I want to like bring up here, that all of these conversations require presence. And it can be very intense sometimes. So it was super intense for me. It has been super intense. My body's, I'm so grateful for it, because bodies, from my point of view, is as physical as it gets, right? To me personally, my body is as physical as it gets. Yes, the world and da da da, but my body, I can touch it, you know? So things that you can feel in your body. It's been so amazing for me to be on this journey of not really buying into the labels of what's wrong, what this means, and really looking at being totally present with, okay, what is this? What is going on here? Is this even mine? And not thinking about it, but tapping into my knowing, energetic awareness. So, anyway, so this is what I was looking at, being present with everything without buying into anything. So being present with me in that example, how that translates, being present with my insanely fast pounding heart. Like literally, when I went to the medical world with this quote unquote problem symptom, they like I went through a whole range of testing, like heart tests and like at the end of it, the story was that they just wanted me to be on anxiety pills. They're like, this is anxiety, and I was like, doesn't make sense. Even if it is what you call is anxiety, I'm not gonna take a pill, not right now. Like that's totally not light for me. So, but anyway, but when I was present with the same thing, being present with a really rapidly beating physical heart in the moment, and being present with it without buying into it, without buying into it as mine, without with just having that one sliver of question that, okay, cool, wait, what if it's not mine? What is this? I get this is so uncomfortable, but what if it's not mine? That kind of requires a level of vulnerability that I invite you guys to look at today. That what vulnerability does presence require of you? And would you be willing to have it with yourself? And vulnerability, beginning with having vulnerability with yourself, like that intimacy with yourself, where you stop making yourself wrong for what you think is completely wrong about you, about whatever the situation is, but still have presence, to have curiosity, to have that sliver of possibility that you can perceive, and reach out for that in the middle of that heaviness, in the middle of that intensity. What would it take to have a level of presence, to cultivate presence with yourself in a way where you're not running away from you? You're not running away from your body. You're not running away from intensities. Now, I'm not saying I'm there. What I am saying is this is what I'm asking for. And if there's one thing I know, it's that ask and you shall receive. I have no idea how it's going to show up. I have no idea when it's going to show up, if it's going to show up in this lifetime. I have no idea. But one thing I know without a shadow of doubt is that I'm asking, the fact that I'm asking, that I'd like to have that level of presence, that level of ease, that level of me, an allowance for everything. I know that it's going to show up. And a lot of times it doesn't show up the way you think it would. Like, honestly, one of the things that I was asking for, with almost every day, was what would it take to have true relaxation with my body? And guess what showed up? Tachycardia and all of the crazy insanity, like all the insanity that I was choosing underneath the surface really came up for me. And through that, it's walking through all of that, that is now I'm starting to now a year plus of really walking through that journey, really allowing myself to go in, really being willing to be present with intensities. And not all the time, there were a lot of moments where I wasn't doing that, but then there were moments where I had those sliver of possibilities that were mine, dominant something that I'm reaching out towards. So I see that, guys, and hey, Amanda, yes, I've done the same thing when my heart is beating super fast. That's awesome. Yeah, so that is one thing I want to like just wanted to share with you guys because I'm now I find it really funny because I'm literally looking at this morning with one of the things being my wisdom tooth. That, oh my gosh, I actually don't want to be present with this, and just being present with that. I don't want to be present with this. That's curious, isn't it? Because when you're truly being present, there is a natural curiosity and question that arises. And so, what if you could give yourself the gift of that today? I'm giving myself the gift of that today, looking at all the things that I'm avoiding and being present with everything without buying into anything, like being present with the intensity without buying into that intensity. I know it feels real. I know it feels more important right now to like avoid and do something else. Cool. I'm going to be present with that. I'm going to be present with the fact that I don't want to be present for however long it takes. So, yeah, welcome to conscious being conscious living. If you thought it's like this amazing spiritual journey where you're going to just close your eyes and breathe, a lot of times you do that too, by the way. I'm mocking it, but I'm not dismissing it. If that's what you thought conscious being conscious living is, yeah, sometimes, a lot of times it's a lot of intensity, and that intensity requires you to be willing to be present with yourself, with whatever is coming up for you in any given 10 seconds, without buying it to be true. All right, my friends, I hope that contributes in some capacity to you listening. And what else is possible? Let's keep choosing. And yeah, how does it get truly any better than this? See